All right, so you want to own a self-storage facility. Picture the pitch. You buy a plot of cheap land on the edge of town, you put up rows of metal boxes with roll-up doors, and then you rent out empty air. That is the whole product. Space. Nothing else. There are no tenants calling you at midnight about a broken heater. No toilets to unclog. No kitchens to remodel between renters. No lawns to landscape. In many facilities, there is barely any staff at all. Sometimes a single person at a desk. Sometimes nobody, just a keypad and a camera. Real estate investors have a quiet phrase for this corner of the market: the best kept secret in the industry. Because while apartment landlords and office owners fight tenants, repairs, and vacancies, the storage owner collects monthly rent on concrete and sheet metal that almost never needs anything. It sounds too clean to be true. Boring, passive, and absurdly profitable. And in the right hands, it genuinely is one of the highest margin forms of real estate on earth. But the reasons why are far stranger and a little darker than the metal boxes suggest. So let me show you how the money actually works. So what does it take to get in? On paper, it is the most forgiving real estate there is. You need land, and unlike apartments or retail, you do not need it in an expensive prime location. A visible plot near a highway or a growing suburb is enough. You put up single-story metal buildings, which are cheap and fast to construct compared to almost any other commercial property. Or you buy an existing facility outright. Then you divide the interior into units of different sizes, from a small closet to a space that can swallow a car, and you start renting. The operating side is where the magic first appears. A storage facility is astonishingly cheap to run. Once it is built, your ongoing costs are mostly property taxes, insurance, some utilities, a little maintenance, marketing, and a very thin layer of staff. There is no wear and tear from people living inside. There are no appliances to replace, no plumbing in the units, no turnover crews repainting between tenants. When a renter leaves, you sweep the empty box and rent it again. The marginal cost of keeping one more unit occupied is close to nothing, which means almost every extra dollar of rent drops toward the bottom line. Here's the first trap, the one that catches amateurs who think this is truly passive income. The barrier to building is low, which sounds great until you realize it is low for everyone. Storage is easy to overbuild, and the moment a market looks profitable, competitors put up new facilities nearby. 2 or 3 new buildings within a few miles can flood the local market with empty units. And because storage tenants are price sensitive, and one box is much like another, the only weapon in a glut is to cut your rate. A facility that looked like a money machine can be dragged into a price war by a stranger who broke ground down the road. The metal boxes are simple. Surviving the supply cycle is not. The land and the buildings are the easy part. The real skill is in how you fill them and, more importantly, how you price them. Now, the part almost nobody outside the industry understands: how a storage facility actually makes money. Because it is not the simple landlord story it looks like. There are several layers stacked on top of that plain monthly rent, and each one is close to pure profit. Start with the base. Monthly unit rent. A tenant signs up, usually online, and pays every month for a space that costs you almost nothing to maintain. Because the marginal cost of an occupied unit is so low, occupancy is everything. And a well-run facility running high occupancy throws off enormous margins. But the base rent is only the beginning. Layer 2 is the quiet engine of the entire industry, and most tenants never see it coming: the existing customer rate increase. You attract a new tenant with a low teaser rate, sometimes $1 for the first month, to win them away from the competition. Then, once their belongings are inside and they have mentally moved on with their lives, the operator begins raising the rate. A few months in, the rent creeps up. Then again, and again. The tenant who signed up for $50 is quietly paying $90 a year later. Why does this work when they could just leave? Because moving out is a physical, exhausting chore. They would have to rent a truck, take a day off, haul everything somewhere else, and most people simply will not do it to save a modest amount. The industry runs on that friction. The whole model quietly depends on human inertia. And the beauty of it, from the owner's side, is that the increase costs nothing to deliver. The unit is already rented, already occupied, already sitting there. When the rate goes from $50 to $90, that extra $40 is not covering any new expense. It is very nearly pure profit, month after month, for as long as the tenant stays too busy or too attached to move. Multiply that by hundreds of units in one building, and the rate increase alone can quietly rebuild a facility's entire margin over a couple of years. Layer 3 is late fees and the lien. When a tenant falls behind, the facility charges late fees on top of the rent, and those fees are nearly pure profit. But there is something more powerful attached. State lien laws give the storage operator the right to seize and sell the contents of a unit when the tenant defaults. After a grace period, certified letters, and the legally required notices, the contents go to auction, and the proceeds cover the unpaid rent and fees. So the operator is never truly exposed the way an ordinary lender is. The collateral is already locked inside the building, and the law lets them sell it. A default is not a total loss. It is a reset, and sometimes even a small windfall. Layer 4 is insurance, and this is one of the most profitable tricks in the business. When you rent a unit, you are typically required to have coverage on the contents, and the facility conveniently offers you a protection plan right there at sign up for a small monthly fee. Here is the quiet part. That fee is often treated not as an insurance premium, but as extra rent, with the actual risk passed to an insurer behind the scenes, and the operator keeps a generous cut of every policy. It is a near-passive stream layered on top of rent, sold to almost every tenant, with very little cost attached. And Layer 5 is premium pricing and retail. The same footprint can hold basic drive-up metal units and climate-controlled interior units and the climate-controlled space rents for a meaningful premium while costing only a bit more to run. On top of that, the front desk sells locks, boxes, tape, and packing supplies at healthy markups in the exact moment a customer needs them and is not comparison shopping. Put all 5 layers together: base rent, relentless rate increases, late fees and lien auctions, insurance commissions, and premium space plus retail, and you no longer have a sleepy landlord. You have something closer to a subscription business wrapped around a metal shed, and subscription businesses, as everyone has learned, are where the real margins live. Run the arithmetic on a mid-sized facility to see why investors get excited. Imagine a site with 500 units renting for an average of $100 a month, full. That is $50,000 in rent every month, $600,000 a year, from a single plot of land and some sheet metal. Now stack the extras on top. A slice of those tenants paying late fees, most of them carrying a protection plan that hands you a few dollars each. A steady trickle of lock and box sales at the counter. And every quarter, the pricing engine nudging existing tenants a little higher. Against all of that, your real costs are a property tax bill, an insurance policy, some electricity for the lights, and maybe one part-time employee. It is not unusual for a well-run facility to keep the majority of its revenue as operating profit, a figure that would be unthinkable for a restaurant, a hotel, or an apartment building. That is the number that made storage the quiet darling of serious real estate money. To see just how profitable this gets at scale, look at the giant of the industry, Public Storage. Founded in 1972 and headquartered in California, it is the largest owner of self-storage in the world, a member of the S&P 500, operating in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 3,500 facilities across roughly 40 states, with something like 220 to 245 million net rentable square feet, serving over 2 million customers. Its market value has run into the tens of billions of dollars, recently in the range of 50 billion. This is not a mom-and-pop operation. It is one of the largest landlords of empty space on the planet. Now the number that makes real estate analysts sit up, and the one you came here for. Public Storage reports a same-store net operating income margin in the neighborhood of 78%. Let that sink in against other property types. A well-run apartment building might convert something like 60% of its revenue into net operating income, and many commercial properties far less. Public Storage is turning close to 78 cents of every dollar of same-store revenue into operating income before the financing and depreciation lines. There is almost no other mainstream real estate asset class that routinely does that. The contrarian claim in the brochure is real. On an operating basis, storage is arguably the highest margin form of mainstream real estate in America, and the biggest operator proves it at massive scale. Why can it hit numbers a landlord of humans could only dream of? Because everything we just walked through compounds when you are this big. Public Storage runs on a sophisticated pricing engine, constantly adjusting rates by unit, by location, and by tenant, squeezing the existing customer rate increase across millions of units at once. Its brand is so recognizable that it acquires customers cheaply, online, with minimal sales effort. Its scale means one regional manager can oversee many nearly automated sites. Its buildings, long paid down, cost little to maintain. And every one of those tenants is a candidate for the insurance upsell and the annual rate creep. The company has spent decades buying up smaller operators and folding them into this machine. And it continues to consolidate, recently pursuing multi-billion-dollar acquisitions of rival portfolios. There is another reason the money is so durable. Storage tends to hold up when the economy turns, and sometimes it even benefits. The industry has a grim little saying about its demand drivers, the 4 Ds: death, divorce, dislocation, and downsizing. All of them push people into storage, and all of them happen in good times and in bad. When people lose a home and move into something smaller, their belongings need somewhere to go. When a marriage breaks up, someone is suddenly living in a one-bedroom with a house worth of furniture. When a relative dies, the family rents a unit to buy time on decisions nobody wants to make. Recessions do not empty the boxes. In many cases, they fill them. That counter-cyclical quality is exactly why investors prize storage, and why cap rates on the best facilities have been driven to some of the lowest, most competitive levels in all of commercial real estate. And public storage has leaned hard into technology to widen the gap. Move-ins that once required a manager now happen entirely on a phone. Access is controlled by keypads and apps. Cameras replace guards. A facility that used to need full-time staff can increasingly run with a fraction of one, which pushes that already thin cost base even lower and that margin even higher. Every dollar saved on labor flows almost directly into the operating income line, which is precisely how you defend a 78% margin while your smaller competitors, still paying a person to sit at a desk all day, cannot match your economics. Scale, brand, pricing software, and automation form a moat that a single facility owner simply cannot cross. Here is the gut punch hiding inside those beautiful margins. The most valuable customer public storage has is not the one who uses their unit. It is the one who forgets it. The person who moved things in during a divorce, a death, or a move, meant to deal with it in a few months, and is still paying years later because the boxes hold things they cannot bear to throw away and cannot be bothered to collect. The 78% margin is not really built on storage. It is built on attachment, procrastination, and the quiet cost of never quite letting go. The company is not selling space. It is monetizing the things people cannot decide about. Now the forces reshaping the business. The biggest one is supply. Because storage is cheap and quick to build, capital floods in whenever margins look juicy, and the result is recurring waves of overbuilding. In hot markets, developers put up facilities faster than the population can fill them. Occupancy sags, and everyone in the area is forced to discount. The single most important question in storage is no longer how do I build one, but how many are already going up within a few miles of mine. Supply, not demand, is what makes or breaks a local market, and the operators who win are the ones disciplined about where they build and patient about riding out the gluts. The second force is consolidation. For decades, storage was a fragmented business of independent owners, and it still is largely made up of small operators. But the big REITs, led by Public Storage and a handful of rivals, have been steadily buying them up, because a small facility bolted onto a giant platform instantly gets the pricing software, the brand, the online booking, and the insurance program it never had alone. The top companies now control a large share of the market, and multi-billion-dollar mergers keep tightening it. The independent owner who once enjoyed the best-kept secret is increasingly selling to the giant who can simply run the same building at a fatter margin. The third force is technology, which cuts both ways. The tools that let a facility run nearly unmanned are a gift to a disciplined operator, but they also mean tenants can now compare prices online in seconds, eroding the local pricing power that older facilities once quietly enjoyed. The metal boxes have not changed in 50 years. Almost everything about how they are priced, filled, and managed has. So what does owning one actually feel like, year to year? Start with the good version. Your facility sits in a growing area with limited new construction nearby. Occupancy is high, in the 90% range, and your pricing software is nudging rates upward on long-standing tenants every few months. Your costs barely move, because concrete and sheet metal do not demand much. Late fees, insurance commissions, and retail sales trickle in on top. Because your building was paid for long ago and needs almost nothing, the vast majority of each new rent dollar becomes profit. You are running a nearly passive machine that spins off cash at a margin most business owners would not believe. And if you ever want out, storage assets sell at premium prices to REITs hungry for more. Now the hard version. A developer breaks ground on 2 new facilities within a couple of miles of yours. Suddenly, the market is flooded with empty units, and to keep yours full, you have to slash your teaser rates and go easy on the increases. Occupancy slips. The rate war eats into the very margin that made the business look magical. Your costs are fixed, so when revenue falls, the pain lands straight on the bottom line. And unlike an apartment with a year-long lease, storage tenants are month to month. They can leave the instant a shinier, cheaper facility opens next door. The same asset that felt like free money in a tight market feels like a slow bleed in an oversupplied one. The gap between those 2 years is almost never about the metal boxes, which are identical everywhere. It is about location, about how much new supply landed nearby, and above all, about pricing discipline, how skillfully you push rates on the tenants who will not bother to leave. The building is a commodity. The operation is the entire game. A great operator and a poor one can own the exact same rows of units and end up with completely different businesses. So here is what you are really buying when you buy a self-storage facility. Not real estate, not exactly. You are buying a subscription business disguised as a metal shed, and its most powerful ingredient is not the land or the buildings. It is human nature. The reluctance to spend a Saturday moving boxes. The inability to decide what to keep and what to throw away. The quiet way a temporary unit becomes a permanent bill. The reason storage can out-earn almost every other kind of real estate is not that empty air is valuable. It is that letting go is hard, and every month someone cannot do it, they pay you for the privilege of not deciding. The next time you drive past those endless rows of identical orange doors, do not think of them as storage. Think of them as thousands of small monthly payments made by people who meant to come back.